Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I am Erik, a teacher with LSAT Demon. With me today is Stewart, one of our teachers who is crushing it at Columbia Law School right now and enjoying a completely restful and uneventful time in between semesters, right?
Yeah, of course. In between semesters, always known as the most quiet and uneventful times. No, I'm still doing my work, still being a diligent law student. But thanks for having me on today, Erik. It's great to be here.
Of course. Today we got an email from Mark.
So Mark says, I took my first LSAT in November of this year, 2024, and I got a 162 with approximately 1 month of studying via some other crappy LSAT prep course. So
Great place to be.
162, yeah, 162 with 1 month of studying. I mean, that's incredibly high. And if you're saying like some other crappy LSAT prep course, I kind of wonder like how much progress did you actually make? And maybe this is representative of a kind of diagnostic score too.
Yeah. Would love to see what you could do with more months of study doing it our way.
Yeah. I recently discovered LSAT Demon. Welcome aboard. And I have already noticed improvements. And I actually look forward to practicing questions now. I'm going to remark on that one because I think that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Frequently thought of like the study process as being enjoyable. And I think that if you can find some kind of enjoyment in the study process, it becomes not only a lot easier to study, but also I think you progress a little easier too because you're kind of engrossed in it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your mind recoils from things that it does not enjoy doing, which you do not want your mind recoiling from the LSAT. So you're gonna be best at it if you find a way to enjoy it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
especially because it's kind of like emblematic of what you'll eventually be doing, right? If you hate if you hate studying for the LSAT, it's a little difficult to then say that you'll really enjoy being a lawyer.
Yeah, for sure. Cool.
Mark
So
continues.
yeah,
I'm planning on taking the LSAT again in January 2025. Okay. In hopes of significantly improving my score. I'm currently working on applications with an addendum explaining my low LSAT score so I can submit applications earlier in the cycle. So I assume here the addendum is in reference to like the 162 with the assumption that when you take it again in January, you're going to have a higher score than 162.
yeah. Which law schools have no reason to believe that a 162 is low for you. They don't have the evidence that you have with your practice test scores and how you're feeling on your current performance. So you can tell them, hey, I'm going to be taking it again in January, but just saying, hey, trust me, I can do better than this, I don't think that serves you.
Yeah, and also, I'm trying to be an optimist as often as I can be, but I'd be a little worried of saying like, I'm going to take it in January and I know I'm going to improve. Like, obviously, you're saying you've seen improvements, but sometimes those just don't translate over to the official test for one reason or another. And if that happens, right, I'd be a little just concerned about, you know, whether or not in the first place you're actually going to have a higher LSAT score such that you can then tack on the addendum and explain it, right?
Yeah, you are putting all of your eggs in this second take. The you're putting your eggs in a single basket, which is the second basket. I'm crushing this metaphor.
Yeah. A lot of
Point
eggs in
being,
one basket.
you're gonna do better if you're not putting all the pressure on the January test. If you remain open to the idea of taking it again later in the spring and in the summer if you need to.
Yeah. So then Mark follows up. Is this the best course of action?
No.
If not, and depending on what score I get in January, should I consider taking one more year to master the LSAT? Or should I just apply to slightly less prestigious schools this year, taking money out of the equation? Thanks, Mark. Yeah, there are a couple of things I want to hit on here. First, I agree with you, Erik. Is this the best course of action? I don't think so. And my reasoning is that, right, you're already kind of saying like taking one more year to master the LSAT. So you know like you have a pretty good idea of what's gonna happen if you take this extra year to study for the LSAT. You said you're seeing improvements already, right? And you've only been studying for such a short time. I still think like much of the progress is still on the table. And I don't know Mark's goals here. Mark doesn't mention, uh, what their specific goals are, but I think here, like I read this line of, should I apply to slightly less prestigious schools? And I kind of think that means that Mark is interested in, maybe a like T14 discussion,
Hmm.
right? And 162, I don't think quite gets you there. Um, but I think if you have the extra year to really get good at the test, as Mark wants to, I think then, you can potentially be in the running for a lot of those schools, right?
Hmm. Yeah, totally. Oh, with the 162 after relatively little study, and you feel like you're improving from there, you're certainly like I would expect you to score in the 170s, and that is prestigious school scoring. But not if it's late in the cycle. In what I believe is a really high volume application year so far. I think it's applications are up something like 25% this year. And yeah, squeaking in January, schools are already going to have so many offers and scholarships out at that point. So yeah.
I think also is that the kind of applying to these less prestigious schools, I think that kind of warrants a discussion too, because,
Hmm.
let's say you fire off these applications. I'd be worried about two things, which was first, the kind of what if question, which is like, what if I could have improved my score by 10 points? What other opportunities might I have seen? Right. That question might not pop up in the immediate, but I think like, a year, 2 years into law school, you might start to ask yourself, like, man, what if I had done, this other course of action? And then the second question is one that I've heard Nate and Ben bring up a couple of times, which is a little bit of a concern of taking like a bad offer just to get in law school, right? Like, oh yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
applied, got in, cool, I'll just take this offer because it's on my table, instead of kind of stepping back and thinking like, well, is this really the best offer for me? Does it meet my goals with regards to, schools I want to go to or money that I'm offered, like those types of considerations.
Yeah. That is a bigger deal than I think many people. Yeah, people don't fully realize how stressful the application process is. And you've been through it, I've been through it. By the time you finally have those offers on the table and you know what your offers are in, you know, February and March, you've been sitting around waiting for them for a long time. And the temptation to just grab your best offer at that point and run is very, very strong. You do not want to have to go through it again if you don't have to. So you might go in with every intention of saying, well, I'll just turn down bad offers and reapply next cycle. You can do that. People do that. I did that, but it sucks. And I know also students who went in with the intention of doing that and then did not, who succumbed to the pressure of, oh, I'm just going to go ahead and take this. This is probably my best. So I'm just going to go ahead and take this offer, even though I said I wouldn't. So it's dangerous.
And I think maybe kind of to wrap up here, or to maybe mention some things that are also important from the standpoint of someone who's kind of been in this situation. If I think I actually had a 162 when my parents were talking about like me potentially applying with that, and then I had something
Uh-huh.
similar to, like, I think I had a 168 shortly after that they were like, hey, you should just go ahead and apply with this. As someone who did decide to wait and improve their LSAT score, I think there too, like I feel much more at peace with where I am in law school. I feel like, I go to a law school that I really enjoy being at, that I'm really pleased with attending and having the opportunity to study with, the students around me, right? The professors that are teaching me, like all of these things meet my expectations and my standards.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of, you know, piece that I have, right? I just don't know that I would have had that had I applied with like a 168 in my case, or in Mark's case, the 162, and kind of felt like I was like settling in some way, right? That
Yeah.
gets back to the question of, what if? And I think
Yeah.
that would have really bothered me in law school. Law school is a, stressful time. Um, Obviously, it's not going anywhere. So taking the time to study for the LSAT isn't, they're not going to suddenly close their doors next year. They're always going to need applicants. The world's always going to need lawyers. But law school is a stressful time, and I think anything you can do to kind of eliminate that stress, and in this case, finding the law school that you think is best for you, that meets all of your standards, and in Mark's case, that kind of sounds like a little bit of this prestige element from the tone of the email. Like taking into mind those things just makes your experience a little easier, right? You're not left constantly like going to torts and thinking of, man, should I have applied somewhere else? Like, no, those things don't come up, and you're able to kind of fully engross yourself in the law school that you go to. Yeah, I think the recommendation here is just, you know, take the time to study, take the time to get what you think is your best score. And here you sound like a 162 is not your best score. You mentioned improvements. Take the time to see those improvements, to get them on paper, and then apply when you're ready. Maybe it's helpful to mention, I can think of maybe two circumstances, Eric, and maybe you'll have
Yeah.
more, of when I would think like applying kind of immediately and getting it over with is the maybe right decision. I'd say the first is if your financial circumstances can't support you, like that you can't, you can't afford to continue studying, or, have some kind of gap year in between whatever path you're on and applying
Mm.
to law school. And the second would, I think, be like if there's some kind of like huge, interpersonal circumstances of like maybe where you're staying or people you're staying with or those who are supporting you, that like, you're in a situation where you kind of need to get away from that.
Sure. Yeah, without knowing anybody's individual story, like there could certainly be situations where either of those, you're correct. I would think that in either of those situations, going to law school is probably not the answer. And there are other things that you could do to either get yourself out of a bad situation or to steady yourself financially before jumping into law school. But I could be wrong. There could be situations that still where that makes sense. I would think that any reason that you can't wait might have to do with like immigration issues. If you're going to get deported, if you don't remain a student, or if you have some sort of benefit, for instance, military benefits that are going to expire if you don't use them up in that year, then those could be reasons why you need to just go ahead and go to law school now.
Yeah. But I don't see anything in the email from Mark here that indicates like that, potentially taking the year off and improving on the score without
Yeah.
applying isn't possible. So
Yeah.
again, right, to answer Mark's question here, I think both of us agree, get the best LSAT score, keep studying, keep finding those little clicks, right? And once you have that score in hand, right, then you start sending out those applications.
Totally. Thanks for joining, Stewart. And thanks, Mark, for writing in. Email daily@lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks for listening.